Step into the world of Inspired by Cyndia, a mental health life coach with a podcast dedicated to mental health and life coaching. Cyndia is here to ignite your inner spark and accompany you on the path to embracing your authentic self. Together, you'll set out on a journey to uncover the stories of remarkable individuals who have left a lasting mark on her. So, brace yourself for a sprinkle of inspiration that will light up your life.
Hey, welcome to Inspired by Cyndia. My name is Cyndia, and today I am just so excited to be here with an amazing guest. Her name is Erica Shoop, and she's here to join me in the conversation on fear and overcoming fear, because at one point we all have it. We all go through it. We know how it feels. And I brought an expert to join us today. How are you today, Erica?
I am doing so well today. Very excited to be here with you, Cyndia.
Oh, I'm excited to be here with you too. I heard you laugh when I said expert. How's
Yeah,
your
I mean,
experience? Mhm.
if expert means I've just put myself into a whole lot of uncomfortable situations, then sure, I'll take that. No, I don't know.
Ooh,
I don't know that I've always navigated fear as an expert, but I think the only way for us to get better at it is to just continue being a little bit uncomfortable so we can learn.
absolutely, I agree. So well, first, before I ask you what your experience is with fear and overcoming it, navigating through it, as you said, what about your childhood? Tell me a little bit about you and your childhood that allowed you to overcome and sense the fear and overcome it. When did you just fly out like a butterfly and just soared?
Wow, that's a big question. I think if I'm thinking back to my childhood, I don't know. I think there was something about the innocence of childhood where I can't necessarily remember a lot of times where I felt fear. I think for some kids, their natural disposition is fear. I think my natural disposition initially was a little bit of fearlessness. But one thing, so I was willing to try things. And I also, like, if I'm thinking about like a physical representation of my fearlessness, I was always just out in my backyard doing like cartwheels and roundhouse and back handsprings and flips and like kind of taught myself. And I never really had fear of doing things like that because I knew that I could learn, and I proved to myself over and over again that I could learn. So I think when I was looking at it through the lens of like cheerleading or gymnastics, I didn't really have a lot of fear initially, but there's certainly other situations where I did. I think fear is something we learn, and my experience of fear, or where I learned to be afraid, I think was more rooted in some of the conditioning that we receive as women from a young age, of like the fear of like being too much or being too emotional or being difficult or being loud or outspoken. We're sort of made to like stay small and quiet and just comply. And so I think a lot of my fear that I developed over time was a result of that like deeply rooted societal conditioning, which held me back more in my early adulthood up until more recently, when I've really started to like untangle a lot of that conditioning and redefine who I am and who I want to be in the world a little bit more unapologetically.
I like that. I like that because we learn fear from maybe something someone else said, some action someone showed you. And I like the fact that you said you redefined fear. Tell me a little bit about that. Walk me through that.
Yeah, I think it's been a long journey for me. I initially, like my parents divorced when I was 7 years old. So I didn't necessarily have like a good model for what healthy relationships looked like, or how to, I guess, just show up in like what it meant to have like a good healthy relationship or like a lasting relationship. And so I got married I got engaged when I was 23. We got married when I was 26. So I got married kind of young. And I think my mentality at that time was the opposite. Like basically whatever my parents did, I'm going to try to do the opposite.
Nice.
Because I wanted to break that cycle and that pattern. What that meant, though, was that I was in a relationship with someone who was a very good person. I will say that to this day, even though we've been divorced for a few years now, just wasn't my person. long term, because I got to a point where when I started to really unpack or untangle some of this conditioning, I was like, wait a second, all of these things that I was told were going to make me happy, like, get married, get a job, get a house, we were on the verge of like getting to the checkbox of like have kids. And I was like, do I actually want this though? And this is where the fear came in for me, because when I started actually asking questions, I didn't really like the answers at first, because it completely dismantled everything that I knew or everything that I thought I was supposed to want for my life. And so for me, at that point, when I wanted to ask for a divorce without any real catastrophic reason for asking for a divorce, which is horrible, right? Like I felt awful. So I had to wrestle with a lot of like guilt and shame and just a lot of struggle around like, what are people going to think? What are they going to say? They're going to ask so many questions. They're going to think I'm insane because this guy's a really good guy. But it was for me like the first time in my life where I felt such a deep, strong inner knowing within myself. And it was so loud, I couldn't ignore it. Like once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it and I couldn't ignore it. So the scariest thing I've ever done in my life is take that leap to end a marriage that was good on paper, knowing that it just wasn't right for me. And that unraveling launched a whole like long journey of really trying to unpack like, okay, well then who am I and who do I want to be and how do I want to show up in this world and what is going to be fulfilling for me in my life. And so you said, like, you called out the word redefine. Like I actually had to rewrite so many of these scripts that I had been given, and it was terrifying and it was hard, and I spent so many days like diving into books and like reading and trying to figure it out. And the fear that was sort of like quiet, like the underlying fear that ran through this whole phase of my life was like, what if you already had it really good and now you've just ruined it? Like, what if it's not, what if it doesn't get better?
Mm-hmm.
And you've now just blown up your whole life. But the voice that got louder and louder was this, like, you're not living in authenticity. You're not living true to yourself. And so I had to keep listening to that voice and following that voice, because that's really what carried me through this intense phase of redefining who I am and who I wanted to be.
Oh, that's amazing. Good for you. And it
Thank
sounds like you found yourself. You are a life coach, right?
I am.
Did you have some help along the way, life coaches and people that was helping you?
Well, before I even officially got a certification in becoming a life coach, a few of my very best friends were life coaches. Two in particular were like my lighthouses during this phase of my life. Like they really were my sounding boards, my confidants, like the people who I could go to with my unfiltered truth and know that I wasn't going to be judged, but that I was going to be seen and validated and supported through this really challenging time. So I will forever be grateful for those people in my life who were that for me. I think I had to learn, though, that a huge part of what got me to where I was, to that place of like, I've checked all the boxes, but I'm still waiting for it to get good. Like when I was in that phase, I was in that phase because I had spent so much time listening to everybody else and trying to do what I was supposed to do. So I think the hardest thing for me during that phase of my life where I was in it, in the trenches and going through it and feeling that fear intensely, was learning to trust myself again. And so I think one thing I did during that time was I actually tried to tune out some of the external voices so that I could learn to listen to myself again. Because if I was going to redefine who I was and what was authentic to me, I couldn't do that by like asking everyone around me, well, like, who am I? I
Yeah.
had to, for the first time in my life, be able to figure that out for myself.
I can definitely understand that. What would you say to the audience about finding your true, authentic self? You said you had some help from your friends and also just quieting down quieting down what other people think and just going out there. What would you say to someone that want to express themselves or get out of a divorce or a relationship? What would you say?
Yeah, I think the thing that was the most profound exercise I went through during that phase in my life, which is one of the biggest tools that I use with my clients when I'm business coaching. And I do like a bit of a hybrid of like business and life coaching, because I believe more in talking to a whole person and building a whole life instead of just building a business that's going to make you a lot of money. Like, it's not going to be fulfilling if you don't have a well-rounded life. So that's just a little sidebar, but one of the exercises that I use with my clients, because it was so profound for me during my own journey, is creating your core values, which kind of seems simple. You could walk up to people on the street, like, what's most important to you? Give me 5 things. But what people would often do is just start to rattle off a list of like characteristics that, may or may not be reflective of who they are, but it's probably a list of what they think you want to hear. Like, well, these are honesty, trust, like, people will just sort of fire off words, but I'm like, okay, but what does honesty mean to you? What does trust mean to you? Or what, like, what do those things mean to you? So actually going through the exercise of taking a list of, 100 or more words and pinpointing the ones that like really hit you in your heart and saying like, oh, this is critically important to me. Now tell me why. Like, so I take people through this exercise of like, find the words, categorize the words, because usually you'll come up with, for example, one of mine is empathy, but other words that I would have circled in that exercise would be like compassion or kindness. Those are all kind of similar. So I would group them together, but then say like, okay, but what is it about empathy that makes empathy the standout value for me? And what experiences have I had in my life that have led me to feeling so strongly about this thing? Like, why do I think it's so important to be empathetic? Or why do I think it's so important to be generous or curious? Like, whatever the things are that you value, and actually write a definition for them. Like, write a definition for yourself. And then those things turned out to be the compass through which it was like a filter. Like, if I had a decision to make, I could pass it through that filter and say like, is this thing in alignment with my values? If it is, if it's a resounding yes, then like, let's go. If it's a resounding no, then we put it off to the side.
Yeah.
And if it's like a maybe, then my approach to that was like, well, maybe this isn't a thing that I do or pursue right now, but that doesn't mean that it's never going to come back and I couldn't pursue it again in the future. It's like when you're trying to figure out who you are and how to turn out the noise so that you can listen to yourself again, identifying what you value was the most critical thing for me to do in that phase of my life, because it allowed me to actually see myself. Like, it allowed me to actually see myself like on paper, in writing. Say like, yes, this is the person that I want to be. It's not the person I was told I should be, or it's not the person everybody else thinks I am, or the person everybody else wants me to be. This is the person I want to be, and this is why. So you're able to just create such clarity. And I think if we're looking at this through the lens of fear too, Cynthia, it's like, if you're afraid to do something, sometimes that fear is like, well, what are other people going to think of me? And so then you can look back at that list of values and say like, it's 100% in alignment with things I value. So actually, I'm not going to pay attention to what other people are going to think of me, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, when I look at this list of things I value, that this is true for me. And it just gives you this like solid ground to stand on when you're walking through some of these really hard moments.
Yeah, that is awesome. So it's basically looking at the higher self, right? Just asking those questions back to the higher self and navigating through there to be who you are, or be who you're supposed to be, regardless of what others think. I think that's amazing. Yeah. And I totally went past the point of letting you introduce yourself. You're so amazing. I was like, Erica, and then we just went into conversation.
Okay.
I know that please tell us more about who you are. I think I got too excited.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited too. So it's all good. I am a business and life coach. That is what I do for a living. And as I mentioned, like kind of briefly, I take a little bit of a unique approach, and I say business plus life because I have over 15 years of experience coaching business owners and working with business owners. But the one thing I saw over and over again working with business owners was inevitably I'd be scheduled to get on a call with someone to talk about their marketing strategy or the actions that they were supposed to take to move something forward in their business, and they'd get on the call and be like, yeah, I didn't do any of that. I had a really rough night with my kids a couple nights ago, or like my partner and I got into a fight, or like there's just this life stuff, or like my parent isn't doing well and I need to take care of them, so everything else got put on hold. And so inevitably this space that was supposed to be for business strategy would get filled with life. And I knew sort of subconsciously in every one of those scenarios over time that like we're not getting anything done today in terms of marketing strategy because this feels too overwhelming. So I need to give this person space for this thing. And so after years and years and years of that pattern showing up again and again, when I decided to go off and start my own business, I was like, I need to do this a little bit differently. I can talk optimization or framework or organization or marketing strategy all day long, but I also want to honor the whole human being in front of me. So that's sort of the approach I take with business and life. But not to say that I'm an expert in it, because even when starting my own business, I allowed fear to stop me in my tracks. I allowed imposter syndrome to creep in. I did all the things that I tell people not to do or that I coach people through, because the reality of it is it's hard. But I think that's why having your people, having a coach or having a community of people to support you through those moments of fear is critical. So that's kind of when you can find those people and lean on them and like navigate through things with them, it changes the game in your life. So I think what I've learned in my journey over the last, like, I don't know, it's probably been about like 8 or 9 years that I've been going through all of this sort of like evolution for myself. It's that. So I think who I am, if I had to answer that question, like my core values are authenticity, generosity, empathy, curiosity, and well-being. So those are the things that guide my personal day-to-day. The decisions I make, the actions I take, whether it's in my life or in my business, those are the things that kind of guide me. So that's a long answer to a short question.
No, it's okay. And can you tell us a little more about what your new project or your project that you're working on?
I would love to. So I have had this dream in my heart for a really long time in a slightly different form, because working one-on-one with business owners was always really fulfilling for me, seeing people figure something out and like put things into practice and see success and then like celebrate that success with them. I think it's awesome working with people one-on-one. I think it's also amazing when you can get a group of people together who don't have this sense of competition, but instead they have this, you foster this culture of like collaboration where like we are all in the trenches together. Our businesses or our approach or our values might not be exactly the same, but we absolutely can learn something from every person in this room. So I've always wanted to do this sort of like group coaching or like mastermind or create some kind of community for people who are self-employed to find people, because being an entrepreneur, starting a business for yourself, whether you're doing it just as a side gig for right now or you eventually want to turn it into your full-time gig, when you're the only person, it feels really heavy and really isolating sometimes. And that's where we tend to get stuck. And so I've just been so passionate about creating this community. And I met a few other people in the coaching school who shared that same passion. And so we have built, and it is open. Our doors are officially open, a community. It's called Kula, which is a Sanskrit word meaning community. And essentially our goal is to create this safe space where people can show up in their uncensored humanity, where we're going to acknowledge all the things that are hard about being a human, whether you're a human building a business or you're working on your mindset or you're navigating a spiritual journey. All 4 of the co-founders of our business happen to be one flavor or another of neurodivergent, which brings its own unique set of challenges. So we're really focused on especially supporting people who are neurodivergent. It's just a space for you to show up and be seen and walk this path with other people. Essentially, like, the road is a lot less lonely when you have people to walk with. So that's really what we're focused on, is just building this like beautiful safe space where we're like, our workshops on a weekly basis could be anything from authenticity and what does that mean, to curiosity and what does that look like for you, or mindful acceptance. How do you just accept things that are challenging or that you can't change or whatever? Because our whole goal is to just help people move through life with a little less resistance and a little more support.
Okay. Will they be live classes or will they be recorded?
Both. We do live workshops every single week. There's usually like anywhere between 2 to 4 workshops to choose from. Most of them are recorded and posted in the community. We do have some things that's like on Saturday mornings, sometimes we'll just get together and do like a little coffee chat. Like, those aren't recorded because it's really just meant to be like an informal conversation for you to have an opportunity to connect and get to know other people in the community. There's no structure to it. It's just like show up and connect with other human beings. So those aren't necessarily recorded, but all of our workshops are always going to be recorded and posted for people to look back on if they can't catch them live.
Okay, awesome. And where can we find all this amazing this?
You can follow us on Instagram. The handle is at findyourkula. Our website is the same, findyourkula.com, and everything on our website has just been updated as of a few days ago for you to jump in and join the community. So if you decide you want to check it out, come on in for 7 days, totally free, just to like take a look around, see how people are interacting, see if it's something that feels like it's a good fit for you, and join a workshop or two. There's no long-term commitment. We really just want to create a space that's like easy for people to come to anytime they need it.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, Erica, I thank you for joining us. Do you have any final things you would like to say to the audience?
One thing that I will just mention is that if you're interested in going through the values exercise for yourself, I created a whole guide to walk you through that step-by-step process that I went through in that sort of redefining phase for myself. It is available on findyourkula.com/Erica. So that's my coaching page, and you can download that resource for free if you want to go through that exercise yourself, because I think, as we discussed, especially when we're looking at fear, when we learn to trust ourselves and our own inner compass, that can be such a strong like guidepost for navigating through our fear, knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're being true to ourselves through every action we take. Again, just gives us that like solid ground to stand on, and it makes it easier sometimes to move through it.
That sounds great. Well, thank you. And can you say that website one more time? I'll have it on the link, but let's just.
Yeah, our website for our community is Find Your Kula, and where you can download the free resource is findyourkula.com/Erica. So Kula is spelled Kula, and Erica is spelled with a C.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, it was a pleasure speaking to you today, and I thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cynthia. It was really wonderful to talk with you too.
Thank you.